Good morning, everybody. This is Judith Echo. You're listening to Mad Love. Let's get into it. So I didn't podcast yesterday because it was Columbus Day, or then you got indigenous people. You know what? This is getting silly. I don't know. There were people living here before Columbus, but I don't care if you call it Columbus Day. No one's actually talking about Christopher Columbus on Columbus Day. Let's be honest. If you're a working person and you get the day off, you're just happy for a long weekend. So, I don't know. It's a lot going on. It's a lot to make out of all this stuff. And I think we're starting to get down to the minutia of what is the hypocrisy. You got Tucker Carlson up here asking these super poignant, super relevant questions. I did not have that on my playlist. I did not see that coming at all, that I'd ever be like, Tucker Carlson's interesting. But one thing about him is we're the same age. So while we grew up in very different individual families, we have a worldview that's similar. We grew up at the same time. We understand what it used to be an American from that unique time from 1969 to today. And it's a curious thing. He's questioning September 11th and all the facts that seem to have been obscured. I haven't watched it yet, but a lot of people feel like that was just something that happened so that all of a sudden they could really get into the Iraq war. So I need to watch what his story is, but he has several pieces on YouTube about what really happened. And then he has guests on all the time who are always questioning things. He certainly has been very vocal against this public case they've presented against this little boy as a shooter of Charlie Kirk, when it's obvious that Charlie Kirk was murdered by a professional shooter. I am not the only one who just looks at these people and I'm like, these are not the shooters. Now, they may have MK Ultra'd them into confessing that they're the shooters, because that is a thing. People are brainwashed. And I think right now you have so many inept people in government and running these three-letter organizations, and they're so blatantly, openly greedy that the brainwashing of the public isn't working. We don't believe in our government right now. Because they lie to us all the time. And it's an era of truth coming to the forefront. And so you can just see that they're just making up a lot of this stuff. I know Die Hard, dyed in the wool, been voting Republican. Not Republican. I don't know very many Republicans. I know some. But people who've been voting Democrat their whole lives, and they're questioning everything now. And you have to, because you look around and it's like you all have steady making all these promises to black people, and black women show up to the polls in droves and vote, and we have nothing to show for it. There's no ROI for voting Democrat. I'm stumbling on my words. I'm not sure why. But it just doesn't make sense. Oh, I know why. Because I'm still not drinking coffee. I'm sharp, but I'm not razor sharp. But yeah, there's no return on our investment. Black people cannot categorically look at their lives and be like, you know what? Voting Democrat has really made my life better. It hasn't. Now we're to the point where we're arguing silly things like boys competing against girls. Listen, I don't discriminate against anybody. If you want to be an athlete, be an athlete. But if you've gone through puberty as a male, you cannot compete with girls. Why are we having this conversation? Science tells us you have 30% more muscle mass. Science tells us you're stronger and faster. So, of course, you're going to win. So, how is this controversial? How is this even a political argument? That's how ridiculous things have gotten on the Democratic side. And they keep wanting to cover up the fact that Nancy Pelosi is an insider trader. And you can Google all of this. This knowledge is sitting out here, and people are tired of being brainwashed and lied to. Because at the end of the day, and all of this started for me, like it's going to start for everybody else going down this path, when you realize there are absolutely no resources available to you and your family when someone you love gets sick with long-term illnesses, like Alzheimer's. And you go take them to the hospital and they look you in the face and say, hey, there's medically nothing wrong with your mom. We know she doesn't sleep. We know she's having all kinds of crazy symptoms and she's hallucinating and she's just been up for days, and we know that, but we don't really have anything for that, and here's a drug that may or may not work. Its number one side effect is death, and we're just going to send you home with that. And it's just, I started to ask then, what is the point of this? My mom did everything an American citizen was asked to do during her lifetime, which is she got married a couple times, she raised a family, she sent kids to schools, they bought a couple of houses, she invested in the American economy, and she was low-key a really proud citizen. I mean, she always had like a 4th of July wreath up on the 4th of July on the door. She always had an American flag shirt. She had an American flag pin. She worked for the federal government. She bought into all of it. And what was the reward? Absolutely nothing. You get old, you get this terrible disease, and they have absolutely no help for you. And it just becomes sort of stunning, like the government has nothing for its citizens. Even the ones who love it, even the ones who went along and did everything that they were asked to do. She was in the silent generation. And that's what they did. They, my mom didn't talk a lot about civil rights. She grew up in St. Louis that it was very segregated. But everything that Black people needed and wanted, they had access to, and they didn't feel any kind of way about it. I think she probably got excited that she could go to Neiman Marcus more freely because that was her store. I'm going to Neiman's. Okay. But all that to say, there's no infrastructure in place for Americans. They do not protect their citizenry. And that's why people are mad. That's what made me mad. Because I'm like, well, okay, so Nancy Pelosi can tune herself up to about $200 million with insider trading. 200 million plus, like over the last 7 to 8 years, she's made a lot of money on the stock market. And if you don't believe me, you can go to do your own research. There's a company called Quiver Quantitative, however you say it. They really have all the goods on people. There are a few other places. Just Google Nancy Pelosi stock market. And you'll see tons of members of Congress, both Democrat and Republican, who've made just a boatload of money sitting on committees and then going and building stock portfolios off of that, which you and I would go to jail if we did that. But for them, it's okay for some odd reason. And they are making money hand over fist. So you ask yourself, well, why are there so many grifters being drawn into going to work for Congress now? And that's part of it, because they plan on grifting you too, right? So, of course, you look at all the number of things we don't have innovation in: medicine, healthcare, education. I remember when I was a kid, we used to have to do these fitness, U.S. fitness tests. I don't even think they do that anymore for kids. They don't care if they're out of shape. The government really stopped pretending to care about its citizens in the last 30 to 40 years. They just really did. And, I'm watching people wake up to the facts like, oh, whoa, I'm about to be old. You think they're not going to have anything for me? Wait a minute. I paid all these taxes. Wait a minute. I've put into my retirement. Wait a minute. I did all of these things, and a lot of people didn't do as well as their parents. There are a lot of people who didn't buy houses, who didn't get married, who didn't have big families. It's like this quiet erosion of what it meant to be an American has happened on these people's watch, and they don't care. So, yeah, a lot of people are starting to look at the government like, well, what is your purpose? And then you make us take a vaccine that A, isn't a vaccine, and B, may have done more harm to the body than healing. And if you took that mRNA vaccine, it was never a vaccine. It was designed to enter your body and change your genes and the way it reacted to the virus. You see what I'm saying? Like, this is insane. This is insane what's happening. And I'm glad people are waking up. I'm glad I'm not the only one that's frustrated. I'm way from the only one. And I don't even have a huge podcast following. I have a very loyal and dedicated listenership, but I'm not a huge podcaster. There are people with much bigger platforms than mine, and they are asking these questions. Candace Owens is risking her life to expose the fact that whoever murdered her friend, Charlie Kirk, was not this person they say, a boy who was in love with a transgender person. Like, it's not that. This man was killed by an expert. All these people that are shooting at Trump, they're experts. And it almost all looks like it's coming from Israel. And it's like, this is getting scary. I mean, I guess there's a reason why we've never seen any bad people in movies being from Israel. But I'll be honest with you, I met an Israeli soldier once. I don't know if he was still a soldier, but I had a student who worked for me, and he was from Youngstown, Ohio, I think. But his dad was former Israeli military, and he was truly one of the most, I don't want to say icy. I think icy is right. He just had zero emotion. And usually when you meet your student workers' parents, they're happy to meet you. Oh, hi, hey. I just remember, and this was years ago. This was like 25 years ago. And I just remember this man had one of the coldest dispositions I've ever met. It was just, if the coldest was a real name, it would have been this man. And his son couldn't be more opposite. Warm, thoughtful, kind. I'm like, how did he raise a son like this? He was just very, very icy. And he was like, well, my dad's, a military man. He served time in Israeli military. And I was like, whoa, it really affected him. So, yeah, I don't know. But I'm beginning to ask a lot more questions. And my main thing is, why do we even vote if somebody's just going to come along and buy off the politicians to do whatever it is that they want? And so how do you not feel helpless when all this happens? Because I have a friend, and she was so upset that Trump is firing all these government workers while they're being furloughed. And I said, I get it, but it's so much bigger than Trump. It's much, much bigger than Trump. This is obviously someone's agenda, and they wanted this to happen. And they clearly want people to not be working en masse for whatever reason. And the only way you can combat this is to have faith and know that this will not stand, that whatever we're going through, the only way out of it is through it. So as a country, we have to go through this. And maybe the robber barons and all these corrupt billionaires will go find new interests or die off or something, because America is just about tapped. But that was the promise of it. There were people snickering when they started calling themselves, when they started calling us a independent, free-thinking, freedom of speech. There were people like, yeah, okay, sure. This country is obviously available to the highest bidder. And yeah, continuously millionaires and billionaires have bailed out the government and they have super access to everything because they bought their way in. And now people aren't even morally opposed to it. It just keeps happening. So the only way to stay encouraged is to keep reading and keep digging, because the more you follow the money, the more you get to the truth, which is this has all kind of been a scam. And the only way to fix it is to let all of this play out, but stop believing everything you see and hear. The government is a disaster right now. None of them seem to know what they're doing. And you can say that from the federals down to the state, down to your county government. Most of them seem completely ill-prepared for leadership. None of them really understand what they're doing. They just got these roles because they're friends with people. That seems to be the Republican way. And I remember when Republicans had character. I remember when Republicans were moralistic. Yeah. I remember when Democrats were noble and kind. Now they just all seem preposterous. And yeah, it's our job to see that, and it's our job to expose that, and it's our job to, make sure we understand what we're really looking at and what we're really participating in. Because the more they make you think the Democrats are right or the Republicans are right, the more they play this game with you and make you think the president has some real power and that these parties actually really mean something, the more you keep believing in that, that's all they have to stand on. Because once you start to pull back and you realize the president is a kind of a puppet, these parties are extreme and ridiculous, that's when they start to lose their minds, because that's when they've lost you. And they recognize that, oh, you're going to try to be an independent thinker. You're going to try to do your own thing. But, this is not what God intended. And so you already know you're going to have to think for yourself and provide for yourself. And it's just going to go back to what it used to be, which is you build a community that sustains you. People get off of their phones and people look each other in the eye and start talking to each other again. And you'll know who you want to be surrounded by and who you don't want to be surrounded by. These big generalizations like all white people do this or all black people, that's silly. No group moves as a unit. Everybody is a separate person. And more than that, after working 7.5 years in a prosecutor's office, I can tell you with certainty, every crime gets committed by every background, race, gender, all of those crimes get committed. It is a kind of person that commits crime, period. There is a kind of person that will stab their grandmother, and hopefully in their mind they're thinking they're killing them. There's a kind of person that would do that. And they represent every race. So as long as we stop trying to separate ourselves on who looks like what and who does what, and we just focus on, hey, they're the 1%, we're the 99%, we'll be much, much better served. And maybe can we stop living us versus them and maybe just build communities that we like, respect, and love and want to be a part of. And in that way, we actually will be united. Because so far, there hasn't been a ton of unity.